Hey guys, it's that time. We're going to do a spoiler review of What If Season 2, Episode 2, which is basically what if the Avengers formed in the 1980s. So check out our thoughts right now.
Night before Christmas, the stockings were hung by the chimney, and the Avengers were fighting a brand new superpower.
I'm Santa Claus, baby!
Starting tomorrow, unwrap one new episode every day for 9 straight days.
So, who's our bad guy?
Yeah! Throw a holiday party. What could go wrong? What If Season 2, streaming tomorrow.
So yeah, we just saw What If Season 2, Episode 2, which is basically what if the Avengers were formed in the 80s. I think this episode is really clever and works really great. I would watch this movie. Basically, the 80s lineup of the Avengers here. It's got Project Pegasus, which is led by, Peggy Carter and Howard Stark, and it's the John Slattery and Haley Atwell versions that you saw in Ant-Man, I think, Ant-Man 2, de-aged. But Michael Douglas is a little younger than he was in this, and he's playing Ant-Man, and he's kind of like the emotional lead in this episode. And the rest of the Avengers in this episode largely take their hit from Ant-Man 2. We've got Lawrence Fishburne as Bill Goliath, the giant man, who had totally forgotten about this character, even though he's like, the antagonist, I guess, of Ant-Man Quantumania. Not Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp, the one with Ghost. He's Ghost's mentor. And there's still some antagonism here, but him and Michael Douglas play really well. And we've got Wendy Lawson, aka Mar-Vell, from Captain Marvel, but a little younger. I think she's a little too young considering the events of Captain Marvel. I think happened like 9 years after this episode. So, yeah, it can work, but she's really good in this, and I actually really like her as Captain Marvel. Annette Bening does a really good job in this episode. And we got T'Chaka as the Black Panther of the 80s. Also works really good. Like I said, this is a pretty solid lineup overall, and the big, member of the Avengers here is the Winter Soldier. But it works because, I'll get into this in a minute. If you guys remember Captain America Civil War, Thunderbolt Ross makes this, idea or statement that, the Avengers shouldn't act unilaterally. It should be international consensus. So you would think with the threat in this episode, an interdimensional or extraterrestrial threat that's going to destroy the world, that the U.S. and Russia kind of would put their differences aside. And here, Russia straight up sends the Winter Soldier to help S.H.I.E.L.D., a.k.a. Pegasus, out. So you basically got, Bucky here, which works really well considering that, Peggy and Howard Stark would know who Bucky is. So you got that kind of like, defector kind of angle, which you see in a lot of 80s movies. And let me just tell you guys, this feels very much like an 80s movies. The soundtrack, the fake 80s songs in this, the focus on kids, very 80s. It's like very Daryl. So basically the plot of this episode is Peter Quill escapes from Ego and he goes back to Earth. And it's still that same plot that Ego had in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where he's going to use these essences of himself to make everything himself. The upside of this is we get Kurt Russell as the big bad in an Avengers movie, and it is Golden Age 80s Kurt Russell, and he's sort of animated that way. He doesn't have the mullet, but he does have the flowing hair. And he works very good as a bad guy here. His powers are kind of scary in this. You know, anywhere he can control the earth. And we do get a kind of cool representation of Ego from the comics when he makes the big giant golem mountain of himself that does look like the comic book Ego. I think my one nitpick on this episode is I feel if this was actually a movie that tied into the MCU a little bit more, we would have Thunderbolt Ross in this episode, and this would be an excuse to actually give us a Red Hulk. I feel like they just probably were like, I would be shocked if putting Thunderbolt Ross in this episode was an idea. I feel like if William Hurt was still alive, they probably would have done it because they are not going to debut Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt in What If. But I feel like probably we would have gone a Red Hulk and it would have been Thunderbolt Ross in this. And I kind of like that idea. So there you go. I mean, that's like the nerdiest effing nitpick of all nitpicks. But overall, I feel like this episode's solid. I like the idea of whatchamacallit, Hank Pym and Hope's relationship being kind of a little frayed with Jan's disappearance, kind of mirroring the disconnect that Peter feels in his relationship with Ego. And I feel like it's interesting too how they like tie that into Bucky feeling alienated as the Winter Soldier, and how they use that as kind of the angle to get him to get away from Russia, you know. Oh, and props for using Karpov here. You know, I enjoy that nice little reference. Here's the Easter egg of all Easter eggs later. I'm saying it now, so I'll remember it later. In season 1, they had a reference to Black Widow trying to hook Captain Carter up with Bernard in accounting. A few episodes in later, Bernard from accounting will make his return reference in this season. That is the most stealthy of Easter eggs. The only reason I even picked up on it is I just happened to have watched that episode preparing for season 2, and I'm like, I just like that there's these weird little through threads that no one would notice at all unless you're just like on it or randomly remember shit. But yes, Bernard from accounting, the weirdest of Easter eggs. Anyway, overall, I enjoy this episode. It's one of my favorite episodes of the whole season. So yeah, if you enjoy this, feel free to tune in. More reviews coming. We'll talk to you later. Subscribe, hit the bell icon. More reviews on the way. All right, see you guys.